You're listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast, and I'm your host, Abuja-based photographer, Tavishima Ayede. The last episode was a freestyle on personal sales and how it's essential for maximizing customer lifetime value. I also tried to show one of the key defining characteristics of personal selling, and that is the idea of it being one-to-one. It could be one-to-one when you're face-to-face, or the intimate nature of the contact when you're giving someone your sole and undivided attention. So it would still be personal selling if you are on the phone and you can't see face to face. If you're doing this over Zoom or some other video medium out there, and it would still be personal selling if you're doing it over text or email. I mean, so long as the idea wasn't that you are broadcasting some message across hundreds of people and you're giving one person your sole and undivided attention. So for those of you who are interested in those sorts of ideas and you haven't been following the podcast, just check out the previous episode, and you're going to find some interesting perspectives about that. Today I'm going to take a detour to discuss a condition which a lot of wedding photographers have, and that is called gas. Before I define what gas is, I'm going to give a history of the podcast because it is tied into this particular disease that wedding photographers have, which is gas. Now, the podcast came about because of suggestions and proddings from some of my friends, chief of whom was Laura Michael Phillips, who is a wedding planner with the Posh and Pristine events. She had me speak at some of her functions where she was training wedding planners, intending wedding planners. And her rationale was that since I'm good at sales, customer service, and these sorts of things, customer conversations, it's my jam, and I should be doing pretty much more of this. And I decided to take her up on it. Also, another acquaintance, Kelly, of the planning company, also a wedding planner and a wedding decorator, suggested that I try something. For those of you who are into YouTube, you can check her out. I think she does something with Queen. I'm not sure what the channel is. I'm not sure what the name of the channel is, but I think the last I heard, I think the show is called Kelly and Queen, and they answer loads of questions. And Kelly thought I should start up something too. Then there's also my photographer friend Rodney, otherwise known as the Young God, and the name of his podcast is the Young God podcast, and he suggested that I should give it a go because in a photo group that we were both involved in, I used to answer a lot of business questions for some of the newer entrants into the wedding photography space. And then of course there's my darling wife and her friends who suggested that I would be good at this. Now, I mentioned that Rodney and I were a member of a photography group, and that was called the Photo Niger Photography Group. It was set up by my friend, Simi Ajose. Now, Photo Niger is an online service that caters to wedding fulfillment. What they do is they produce premium, standard and high-end albums, frames, and wedding souvenirs. So they cater to wedding photographers, of course, because we have to get our books and our frames made. But wedding planners and brides and grooms may also find it useful because they can have souvenirs made as well. Now, Simi Ajose created a group so that we photographers who were his regular customers could get together and jam on business ideas, photography technique, those sorts of things. But what ended up happening was that group discussions on the Photo Niger group turned out to be more about gear and lenses. What's the latest camera? What's the latest lens? What's the latest megapixel count? The usual things that photographers obsess over. They would also obsess over retouching theory. How do you do high frequency separation and all kinds of terms that I've never heard. Well, to be frank, I'm not really a gear person or a computer person, so some of those discussions just went over my head. The few times that we would discuss business, we would end up hovering around this idea of price uniformity, because a lot of people figured that the main reason why business was bad for them, or the reason why business is bad overall, is because you have people who are willing to take low prices and undercut everybody else. So the solution was pretty much, well, the latest I heard on the group, I think last year, there were talks about coming up with some uniform pricing, that will be enforced through that would be broadcast on the Facebook group and enforced through peer action. So if you had been a photographer of so number of years, you would charge between 150 to 250. Another tier would be 250 to 500, and on and on and on and on and on. Basically ideas which I didn't support for reasons why you are going to hear in the later part of the podcast. Now, I think that for the group, there were a couple of resources that we failed to take advantage of. And for those of you who are not wedding photographers, wedding planners and the rest of you, I hope you guys are going to learn from our examples about how we failed to take advantage of these resources in the group. Now, I mentioned that there's a friend of mine, Rodney. At the time, he managed to, I think maybe this was 2 years back, he also, apart from weddings, he also does some conceptual type photography, high artsy, fine art kind of things. It's hard to describe, but really some conceptual stuff. Basically, the sort of things that you would see in a museum. And there was once that he was able to sell some of his stuff for about $7,000, and that was real big news. So of course, some of us on the group were really jazzed up about it. And while we're on the group, I tried to get him to talk about the transaction. How did he find a buyer? How did he put it together? Paperwork and all of that. But everybody on the group kept going back to the usual stuff. They wanted to know about what camera he used, what lens did he use, how did he retouch the image, how did he composite the image. I think compositing is a technique where you have one image and you cut it out and you paste it on another image. So they wanted to know, how did he composite the image, how did he frame the image, on and on and on, and stuff that, in my own opinion, I think are not really the main deal. I think if we're a group of professional photographers and one of us has been able to make a hit of about $7,000 in selling a painting, I think we should be more interested in the business aspect. I think that is the key thing. How did he put together that deal? How did he find a buyer? How has he figured out the international market? Those are things that we should be paying attention to, because I really don't think that the things that sealed the deal for him was the brand of the camera that he used, or its megapixel count, or his retouching technique. All those things, of course, have to be there to make a decent work of art in the first place. But in my own opinion, these sorts of things are the easiest things that these are the easiest things that we can learn, because we have YouTube, and we have other people to teach us all these things about cameras, how to retouch, how to composite, how to do all the computer stuff, basically. And then I also introduced, I got a UK lifestyle and wedding photographer, Obi Nwokedi, does really nice stuff, and he's been doing this for a very long time. I think even back when I was in uni, I used to see some of his stuff, and I got him to be a member of the group, and I thought that people would be inspired and get to ask him about the business process behind what it is that he does. But then again, the usual questions kept coming up. What kind of camera do you use? What kind of lens do you use? What's your philosophy on lighting? How do you achieve your look in retouching and things like that? But I was of the opinion that the more important thing that people needed to learn from Obi Nwokedi while he was a member of the group was not about all the gear and retouching and all of that, but was to find out how he positioned himself as a Nigerian in the UK to take advantage of the UK market, especially in the niche that he was involved in, because he was doing lots of Nigerian and are they called West Indians? I think Nigerians and West Indians, and then some Asians. So he had a niche market that he was delving in, and I thought it would have been more important to ask him questions about that, so that we can learn how to grow our businesses. And time again, while I was a member of the group, I saw that these were the sorts of things that we were missing out on, and a couple of things that I tried to key up on the group, some of the some of the members of the group were not able to take advantage of. And that's one of the reasons why I set up this podcast, especially after discussing with my wife. She's of the opinion that some folks just won't get it, and I finally agree with her that some people are just hooked on whatever it is that they're hooked on, and they can't see the way and the truth that what is going to get you out of your stale financial affairs if you're a wedding photographer is not the technique. It's not because you have a bad camera, it's not because of your poor lens, or it's not because you can't retouch, and it's not because of price uniformity. It's not because somebody else is undercutting you on price. Now, technique is essential. It absolutely is essential, because with the rise of the internet now, you'll find that our skill set is pretty much I won't say pretty much the same, but there's a high level of skill set that we have right now amongst wedding photographers, amongst wedding planners, cake bakers, or whoever, whatever it is that you're involved in. And I think that that's because the internet has democratized the learning in our industry, and so because of that, we're able to get access to high quality learning. So this is my premise. Given that we all have the learning at hand to improve our technique is going to be a given. Why don't we focus on that thing which sets us apart, which is going to be education in the business space? I think that is what is going to make you a better photographer, a better wedding planner, or the better cake artist. It's not going to be because of your gear, because you have a camera that's 10 years old, or because your cake mixing machine is 20 years old. Or I don't think it's going to be primarily about price uniformity, because you're trying to hold a price of 250,000 for one wedding cake, but your neighbor next door is willing to take 75,000 naira for the cake. I don't think these are the key issues. So basically, my setting up this blog and all other resources that I put out there in written form is to advance the idea of marketing over innovation. We already have our innovation pegged down. We are good on technique. What we need to cure is the marketing aspect of the business. We need to learn how to project out there so that people know who we are, what it is we do, the value that we provide, and then in one-to-one conversations, that is where personal selling comes in. We're able to communicate the value that we can provide, and of course ask the right questions to find out what problem it is that we're trying to solve in the first place. Back to my example of a 250,000 naira wedding cake. There's no point in you trying to hustle your 250,000 naira cake around if your marketing is set up in such a way that you're only coming in contact with 25k brides and grooms. So you see, that's the reason why I think we need to cure the marketing function. That is my personal bias. Now, back to the main question. What disease is this that wedding photographers have that is called gas? It was something that I saw on a blog. The idea is not originally mine. I came across it a couple of years ago. I think it was from, there's this wedding photographer in Los Angeles. I think his name is Cheng or Chan or something. I can't remember. And he spoke about gas, gear acquisition syndrome. And that is the disease that a lot of Nigerian wedding photographers have. Gear acquisition syndrome. They just have to have it. New gear comes out, the latest 2020 Sony camera, Nikon this, Canon that, they just have to have it. The Sony 1 point whatever G lens, they just have to have it. They just have to have absolutely everything that's on the market. What is the latest version of this retouching website? They just have to have it, and on and on and on and on and on. And that's the problem that wedding photographers in Nigeria have, gear acquisition syndrome. So my advice to the rest of you listening to the podcast, all ye wedding planners, all ye cake artists, all ye MCs, and pyrotechnic and lighting people and DJs and the rest of you, please do not fall into this disease that wedding photographers have, because that, I think, is the key thing that is limiting us. We have gear acquisition syndrome. We always think the problem is we need to buy a bigger camera, buy a better camera, buy a better holster, buy better lighting, buy a better computer, it just goes on and on and on and on. We'll keep on doing everything apart from paying attention to what is the key aspect in our business, which is we need to learn how to market, learn how to promote, learn how to sell, and learn how to distinguish ourselves. So that's it. Gear acquisition syndrome. Please, brothers and sisters, the rest of you who are listening to this who don't happen to be wedding photographers, don't fall into this disease, because if you do, it'll take a very hard time to get out of. And let me get back to my 250k cake baker example. You assume that the reason why you're not making progress in the business is because your cake mixer is 20 years old. So you run out and then you buy the 2020 model. Guess what? Your business is not going to change and it's not going to improve if, with all this money that you spent on the new equipment, your marketing is still poor and it still is attracting the wrong kind of clients that you do not want. So please don't catch the disease, don't catch gear acquisition syndrome. And as usual, if any of you have questions, comments, inquiries, hit me up on email. That's ayede.taver@gmail.com, ayede.taver@gmail.com. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. I'll catch you on the next episode.